Hi, this is Debbie, and today I want to look at using a beautiful church die cut along with a simple watercolour wash to give a pretty wedding card set. I'm starting out with 3 pieces of Arches cold press watercolour card, and on the first piece I want to white heat emboss the Tying the Knot sentiment from this congratulations set from Simon Says Stamp. I've placed the stamp on the door with Misty, and I've treated the watercolour card with EK Success powder tool, which will stop embossing powder sticking where you don't want it to. And then I'm going to stamp the image with Versamark. This is a sticky ink which embossing powder will adhere to. I've repeat stamped it a couple of times to try and counteract the rough nature of the watercolour card and get the best impression. I started storing my embossing powders in these spice shakers. I find that they're easy to shake on the embossing powder, and also they don't take up much storage room. I can then tap off any excess and heat set the embossing powder with a heat tool. I've mounted the 3 pieces of watercolour card onto boards with 3M painter's tape. This will stop the watercolour card warping when I bring water to it. My current love of watercolouring means that I've been buying more watercolours, and I found for myself the easiest way to keep them is within this palette. It has 48 half pans within it, and you can buy these palettes with the paint included in the half pans, or equally you can buy the half pans empty and add your own colours to them. So this means if you've got a favourite tube of watercolour, that you can squeeze it into an empty half pan, wait for it to dry, and then place it in the palette, and then you've got all your favourite colours all in one place. I think I've got 4 or 5 different watercolour companies contained within this palette at the moment. I've got Winsor & Newton, Daniel Smith, Schmincke, and De La Rowney, I think, so that's 4. Today I'm using Daniel Smith colours. Mainly I'm using Quinacridone Coral, which is this beautiful rich pinky coral colour, and later on, just for a bit of variation, I bring in some Quinacridone Gold as well. I'm using a simple watercolour wash technique. I've laid down a wash of water and then brought in some light colour, allowing the water to do all the work for you, and the colour will slowly seep out, giving lovely soft edges. After I've got the first soft wash down, I can then start to bring in deeper colours, slowly adding more colour, moving the brush around, getting those lovely soft edges, and building up the colour until it starts to get a bit deeper. Later on I can bring in the Quinacridone Coral to add some variation. At times I will also use my heat tool to dry the layer and then bring in another layer on top to add more variation. I'll play some music while I continue to watercolour, and I'll be back soon. Once I'd finished with the watercolour wash, I then took a solution of Perfect Pearls, gave it a good shake up, and then used the tube from the container to splatter on the Perfect Pearls. I did this over all 3 panels, and I think this adds a lovely sparkly finish to the backgrounds. I'm using the Churches dies from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm going to cut 3 of them from some spare watercolour card by running the die through my die cutting machine. I'm then going to add some sparkle to these with the Distress Stickles Dry Glitter in Clear Rock Candy. I'm going to adhere the glitter by rubbing on some Ranger Multi-Medium in Matte. I'm adding a little squirt to various areas of the church die and then rubbing that in with my finger before dunking the dye in the glitter. And it comes out of the glitter covered in a lovely subtle sparkle. Now that the background panel is dry, I can remove the painter's tape and I'm going to cut these panels with a stitch rectangle. I've chosen the second largest of the rectangles and I'm going to run them through the die cutting machine. Now that the card is starting to come together, I want to add a couple more sentiments. So I'm using this Celebrate and RSVP from the Make an Invitation set and also the Mr. and Mrs. from the Congratulations set. I've placed those sentiments on the drawer of the MISTI, treated some smoke card with the EK Success powder tool and stamped the sentiments with Versamark before white heat embossing. I can then use the scalpel and ruler to trim out the sentiments before starting to work out where I'd like them positioned. I've added foam adhesive to the back of the churches and also the sentiment strips, and then I can take off the release papers and apply those to the watercoloured panels. It was at this point that I realised I preferred the tie in the knot panel without the Mr. and Mrs. sentiment. Finally, I added lots of foam adhesive to the back of each of the panels before attaching those to fog card bases, and then I added a few sequins to decorate, attaching those with Ranger Multi-Medium in Matte. Now that completes this wedding set with softly sparkling die-cut church over a pretty watercoloured wash. I'll leave the links to the products I've used down in the YouTube description, and also there you'll find a link to my blog post which will have more details as well. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'll leave you with some photographs, and if you've enjoyed today's video then please consider clicking subscribe. Thank you.